sustainable waste actions in the Pacific, also known as the SWAP project. It is funded by the French Development Agency, and I am pleased to be facilitating this workshop today. So in the last few days, we have experienced at least 3 earthquakes here in Samoa. And this reminded me a major event that occurred in Tahiti Island, so in the Caribbean region on February 9th, 2010. At this time, I was living in Martinique, so it's a French territory, also located in the Caribbean region. And I remember how Martinique people were affected by this huge event. I am sure that our colleagues here from Island Innovation remind also this event, because it was a very, very big event in the region. Unfortunately, lots of building and infrastructures collapsed, but also tens of thousands of people were died during this event. So we were very affected also because this huge event could have happened in Martinique Island as well. And also because after this disaster, a cholera pandemic started. So the spread was much faster because the health and sanitation infrastructures were damaged and unfunctional. So this is just one event that shows us how one disaster can lead to another disaster, like pollution, pandemic. Also, it happened in Tonga this year after the volcano eruption and tsunami with the COVID pandemic, starvation, and so on. So, yeah. So the main question of this workshop is how experience and lessons learned from Pacific Islands can help reinforce preparedness and the organization of the response to make faster and more effective the response and the access to communities, to avoid or at least to minimize the domino effects. And this includes waste management, disaster waste management. Actually, disaster waste management, an effective disaster waste management is not only to avoid the generation of waste that will later be dumped in landfill, but also because an effective waste management can also make easier the response and the access to these communities to provide water, food, health assistance, and so on. So to discuss this question, this workshop is structured in 3 parts. So first, we will start with an overview of the regional framework. Then we will continue with experience sharing from Pacific Islands, namely Samoa, Vanuatu, and Tonga. And we will end this workshop with a focus on how good we can reinforce good practices in the region. Just before we start, I will remind that this workshop includes interpretation service for our French-speaking participants. So I just would like to ask our speakers to speak slowly to make the work of our interpreters easier. Thank you. And so now that the objectives and the arrangements for this workshop is set up, I suggest that we start with the opening remarks from Anthony Taluli. So Anthony is the director of the waste management and pollution control here at SPRED. So Anthony is attending this workshop from Suva today, but these are new opportunities offered by this virtual world. So that's great. And over to you, Tony. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Julie. Bula, Talofa, Bonjour, Malolele, and a good morning to you all, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Or rather, a good evening if you were, a good evening if you had just come back from Uruguay. Just a few opening remarks, and we will have a look at what are some of the lessons that we can learn from previous experience. And I recall, since we're in Suva and the Fiji hub is at SPC, I just want to share three things, and it's S, P, and C. S is for the significance of the discussion that we'll have today. P is for the preparedness that we need to do to prepare for a disaster. And C is the coordination between the NDMO and the environment sector. So SPC. When we were in Uruguay 2 weeks ago, or last week rather, and the executive director for UNEP was saying that it's significant what's happening around the region, or around the world rather, that there's a lot of travel, and UNEP and the global world is finding it very hard to squeeze in a lot of these meetings at this time. But if you look at the meetings that are happening, so in Egypt, a few weeks before, we had COP27. And then in Uruguay, we had the first negotiating committee meeting to discuss plastic pollution. And then this week, we have the biodiversity COP. So she was referring to the triple planetary crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity that are happening in sequence, one after the other. So although there was a big demand on people's time, and particularly on member countries, that it was significant that these three significant planetary crises are happening one after the other. So disaster or natural disaster gets worse because of climate change, and we're feeling the effect of it. All of us in the region have, in one time or another, been through a hurricane or a typhoon, wherever you are in the Pacific. And in the Pacific, because we are so large, that we have tropical cyclones, we have typhoons all year round. In the south, you have it from November to April. In the north, the other times of the year. So we're pretty much under constant threat. And in saying that, the impact of disasters to our GDP is very significant. It can set us back billions of dollars, years in terms of development. So the significance of this is fairly high. So that's the S. In terms of P, I think that in the preparedness, this is an opportune time for us to look at the lessons learned from previous incidents, because of we are now going into the southern hemisphere cyclone season. And so I think that it's really a good time to reflect and to perhaps to get ready for this cyclone season for the southern hemisphere. And then we come to the C in terms of the coordination, that I'm very glad that we've been able to get the two sectors, the disaster waste management sector, the NDMOs, and also the environment sector, because I think that it is significant that the recovery can be enhanced with addressing disaster waste, which has always been part and parcel of the NDMO process. But I think this is just further recognizing that there are, and as Julia said, could be a pile-on effect of natural disasters to many other waste and pollution issues. I just recall that, for example, tropical Winston, when Winston struck Fiji, I recall that there were several vessels that were either grounded or on the reef or on land, and they had follow-on effects such as the release of hazardous waste, oil spills, and whatnot from those incidents. The tsunami that happened in Samoa had lots of transport vehicles that were taken back into the sea. So you have all these follow-on effects from natural disasters that could impact or has a or has a big significant impact on communities from waste and pollution issues. So I'm very happy to see the sectors coming together to coordinate the work and to raise the significance of pollution in the dialogue of climate change and also of biodiversity. With those few words, I think I'll stop there, and I'd like just to thank the hubs that are in Samoa, Tonga, Vanuatu, as well as Fiji, and our colleagues from SPC for the sharing of the lessons learned that we will do this afternoon. And then, of course, our colleagues from J-Prism, and also to thank SWAP and also Packers Plus for the work that they're doing in this disaster waste management area. Thank you very much. Over to you, back to you, Julie.
Thank you very much, Tony, for this opening remarks. Yes, as you reminded us, we really start the cyclone season now. So yes, it's good that we have this workshop today. It can help prepare for this. Cross fingers, there will be no cyclones in the Pacific region, but just in case. And also to make the links with the other international meetings that was held like the COP27 in Egypt. And because, yes, of course, unfortunately, climate change impact has increased the scale, like the cyclones, they are more frequent and more, and the impacts are more important. So that's why we are pleased to start this workshop with our colleague, Sione Fulubei. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. So he is the coordinator of the Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific here at SPRED. Sione has a long career working on climate change issues. Indeed, prior to assuming the position of the FRDP coordinator, he was chief negotiator for Tonga at the UNFCCC negotiations. He has also been working for 15 years in Tonga under the Climate Change and Chemicals Conventions and was formerly head of the Tonga Climate Finance Division. So the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Can we share the Sione's presentation, please?
Okay, thank you, Julie, and Malolere, Tampalawa, and Mulganaka to everyone, and a great afternoon to everyone also. So I will quickly run through the framework for resilient development in the Pacific and try to capture what this actually entails, the work involved, and how countries, especially in the area of waste and disaster waste, will potentially be able to tap into areas or elements within the regional framework that could complement and supplement the work that countries are currently undertaking. So if I move to the next slide, please. Okay, so just in a nutshell, back in 2016, the Pacific leaders had agreed to formulating a joint regional framework on climate change and disaster risk reduction. And so the purpose of this was originally to utilize the limited human resources and human resource capacity that we had in the Pacific region. And this is notably a big focus on the limited human, personnel that Pacific Islands had on board and would be able to utilize in undertaking work in both climate change and disaster risk reduction. And a full example would be, say, the establishment of the NDMO in Tonga, which had for several years run with only a staff of about 3 personnel. And so when the I guess you'd say the aura or the significance of disaster risk reduction as well as climate change grew, naturally they had to put in place systems and processes which would enable the NDMOs within countries to better respond to disasters as well as climate change. From this slide, it's pretty much saying that where we are in terms of the framework for resilient development, it was bringing together development partners, the private sector, civil society, all the specific island countries and territories, academia, to better coordinate, say, at the regional level, as a measure to better provide services to the national level. And so that's where we are. That's how that was a response to the call by countries in utilizing what you could say a merged regional framework. Just to note, the framework for resilient development in the Pacific is the first of its kind in the world. I'm not aware of any other region in the world that has actually merged the two, but I could say discussions on such a framework for the Pacific had pretty much started around late 2008, early 2009. Tonga was used as you could say the litmus test for having merged national plans in which Tonga developed their joint national action plan on climate change adaptation and disaster risk management in 2009, beginning in 2010. And so that was a 5-year document, which I understand has already moved into the JNAP2. And again, I started to implement areas in terms of joint climate and disaster work. And so that, you could say, would actually mirror the work that's been done at the regional level, in which you have a coordinating mechanism at the national level that acts as a conduit for coordination and a coordinating mechanism at the regional level. So it's pretty much looking at how to best align both regional coordination and national level implementation. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the FRDP? As I mentioned, it's a merger of two frameworks which their sunset ended around 2015. And so that was the Pacific Disaster Risk Reduction and Disaster Management Framework. Also known as short form as the RFA here in the Pacific, as well as the Pacific Islands Framework for Action on Climate Change, the PFAC. And so the FRDP, in essence, is viewed as a guideline or a guidance tool for voluntary actions by all stakeholders. And what I mean by all stakeholders is that the actions that are described in the FRDP is for implementation by national governments, by civil society, by private sector, as well as academia and communities. And so this document can be, I guess, used to assess what potential and possibilities there are at the regional level in providing complementary or supplementary actions to those at the national level. And so you could say that if there was a community plan within a country that had to look at disaster risk reduction measures and I guess direction, you could use the FRDP as a tool to see what's available, and also tap into the membership of the FRDP, which I'll come to soon, as a way of garnering, I guess, potential assistance through the regional framework. The purpose, again, is pretty much aligned to what you would find at the national level, and that's to enhance resilience to climate change and disasters in ways that contribute to and are embedded in sustainable development. And so these days you will find climate change as well as disaster embedded in national plans and mainstreamed across national plans across all sectors. And that mainstreaming process and streamlining processes, which is from governments down to the community level, have been taking place over the last decade. In some countries, it's been at a very rapid pace, and some countries are a lot slower. But again, that all depends on the human capacity and the resources that you have available to be able to pursue such a process at speed. Next slide, please. Okay, part of the FRDP and its development was establishing a governance structure on how to implement the FRDP. And so what had been established was what is termed the Pacific Resilience Partnership. And the partnership is made up of consists of 15 members that are representatives from countries and territories, regional agencies, development partners and donors, civil society, the private sector, as well as academia. And this task force also has over 100 affiliated members. So these, when we say affiliated members, this is in reference to different organizations that are undertaking similar work within the region, and as well as at country level. And so you could use a simple example where you'd have a umbrella organization at the regional level who have their little satellite organizations across the different countries. And so if you had Piango, say, as a regional member, you would have all their affiliated members, such as Sango, Tango, at the national level. And so information at the regional level can be distributed and disseminated via this task force to all these affiliated members within the region and at the national level. Next is the PRP support unit. So the PRP support unit provide the technical as well as it's a mechanical advice to the task force. And so this unit is made up of 3 crop members, specifically SPRED, SPC, and PIPS. And so they're tasked with supporting the task force in achieving its objectives. And those objectives usually are found in the FRDP, all those activities under the FRDP. They also coordinate, facilitate what is called the Pacific Resilience Meeting. That's a biannual meeting in which all, you'd say, practitioners in the fields of climate change as well as disaster resilience come together, usually over a 3-day period, to discuss and dialogue on what's happening at the national level as well as the regional level, sharing advice and lessons, and as well as trying to ensure that what we're doing here in the region is visually dispersed to other similar regions, such as the Caribbean as well as the Indian Ocean region. So it's a good way of showcasing what we're doing at the national level, at the regional level, and how our lessons can be shared at the international level. There's also technical working groups that provide, I guess, expert processes as well as advice. Originally, there was 5 technical working groups that was established in 2019. So you can see that there's a lot of these technical groups related to disasters, such as the disaster risk finance, human mobility, risk governance. But at the same time, earlier this year, in July of this year, the PRP task force had resumed for the first time a face-to-face meeting in July since 2019, in which a disaster waste technical working group was established. The membership of that working group has yet to be determined, but the best way that we see going forward is that there is an existing disaster, regional disaster committee formulated by the countries, that would be the best way to, I guess, populate the membership of that new work. As I mentioned earlier, there's a biannual Pacific Resilience meeting. We're currently in discussions as to when that will be held this year. It's held every 2 years, so 2023 is the next meeting, and so we're looking at whether it will be happening in August this year or November. This usually aligns to the Pacific Foreign Leaders meeting, and so once that date has been secured, so too will the meeting for the PRM. Next slide, please. In the FRDP goals, there are 3 overarching goals. You can see up there. In terms of waste, goal 3 is the most practical entry point for disaster waste and post-disaster waste, and that's strengthened disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And you can see there I've highlighted in green that there is potential areas of focus in terms of post-disaster waste to energy. There are some circular economy activities happening within the region at the national level, and this could be another way of dealing with the post-disaster waste. However, there's also potential for waste under goal 2. Again, if you're looking at converting waste to energy, you're also looking at possibilities of low carbon development, turning all that waste into renewable sources of energy. And also goal 1, there is potential under goal 1 in terms of the planning processes. But one thing, there's always that post-disaster category of building back better. That is very much applicable to all islands here in the Pacific, but there's also a need to build back faster. And why we say build back faster is because of the frequency in which the Pacific region receives or is, I guess, vulnerable to disasters. Julie mentioned just earlier this week, we experienced 3 earthquakes and tremors, and that's something that happens every year, not just every year for tremors, but every year for cyclones. If I can give you an example of the reason why building back faster is also critical, is when you do build back better and you're hit by another consecutive, say, cyclone or earthquake, the work that you've undertaken crumbles again. So you'll have to start again. And Cook Islands is a good example of when they received, I believe it was 5 consecutive cyclones in 44 days. And so you can see that once you start, you need to build back as fast as possible. But again, that depends on how fast you can mobilize your human resource capacity and capability, as well as the financing required to build back better and build back fast. Next slide, please. Elevating waste to the FRDP. How is elevating this waste to the FRDP going to be beneficial to the work currently being undertaken at the national level as regional level? Well, of course, I mentioned the main focus is on goal 3 and establishing a technical working group under the PRP. It opens the doors to a lot more greater network that doesn't just end here in the Pacific, but can be extended a lot wider to other regions in the world that experience the same disasters that we do. And especially with the Caribbean as well as Indian Ocean SIDS, who are under a similar geographic, I guess, vulnerability as us here in the Pacific. You probably also something to take note of is that the top 10 most at-risk countries to the world when it comes to disaster, there are several, about 4 or 5 countries that rank in amongst the top 10. And you get close to all Pacific Island countries within the top 20 to 25 at-risk countries in the world. And so the higher we are at risk in terms of disaster, both natural as well as human induced, you know that the waste and rubble is going to be at a higher level as well. So I guess putting things in place in order to deal with that is going to be critical, not just now in the work already been undertaken, but into the future. There's a lot more areas of work that need to be enhanced, and disaster waste is one of those areas. And I believe that's my last slide. So, thank you very much. And any questions, I'm more than happy to answer during the discussion. Yes,
thank you very much for this first presentation. It's good to know that this question of disaster waste management is also a focus on this framework for the resilient development in the Pacific. So I would like to invite our attendees and participants if they have any questions or comments. There is one. Yes, Sulieti, please. Or there is a question from Tonga, so yeah, please.
Hi, Talo. Thank you for the very informative presentation. Just a question. How do we gain access to how do we gain access to goal 2 and 3 that you just mentioned earlier in your presentation? Thank you.
Thanks. Well, the membership of the PRP task force has country representatives, and the current representative is split into sub-regions. So you have a Polynesian, Micronesian, and Melanesian representative, and the current member and alternate members for the Polynesian sub-region is Tonga and the Cook Islands, and they had that role since 2019, representing the Polynesian subgroup. So any countries who are wishing to tap into those 3 goals in the areas and potential, I guess, for tapping into those 3 goals is, I guess the best way would be making a submission to your country representative. And that could be directly writing to the member and alternate member, or it could be by way of sub-regional platforms such as the Polynesian Leaders Group, the Melanesian Spearhead Group, or as well as the Micronesian Presidents and Leaders Group as well. But again, that all depends on how the sub-regional representatives, country representatives, wish to, I guess, provide information, as well as from the national level, as well as disperse information from the regional level. And so I guess for Tonga, your best option would to either go to PADEC through the CEO, who is the current Polynesian member rep. That will be the next rotation of the membership will be happening next year. And so we are getting 2 new, I guess, member and alternate member for all the countries. And so the PRP task force and support unit will update the countries and the focal points from each country on who the new memberships members are, and then you'll be able to submit your, I guess, your requests through them.
Thank you. So is okay, Mafileo? Anything else?
Yep, that's fine, Julie. Thank you, Talo.
Oh,
Are there any other questions or comments? So just I have one question is about your under goal 3 you said that there could be a focus on post-disaster waste to energy. So are there already activities conducted for this?
Okay, well, to my understanding, Tonga is now under, well, they're looking at new waste to energy processes, and it's good to see that I believe Waste Authority Tonga are also online, but it's a collaboration between Waste Authority Tonga, MADEC in Tonga, as well as I believe it's the Public Enterprise, Ministry of Public Enterprise. And so to my knowledge, they're looking at ways of turning, it doesn't matter what type of waste it is, preferably solid waste, and leave the green waste for composting, but looking at potential for turning all that solid waste into what's called syngas. So syngas is also a clean type of gas that be able to utilize to power their national grid, and will also, I guess, reduce the amount of fossil fuel imports to the country based on. So I guess it comes down to the more waste you have, the more energy you can produce. And this is a process that works pretty much as a circular economy type format. And so I guess Tonga's are looking at that. And I don't know how far they've progressed, but I know it's already on the table.
Thank you. So, any other questions? Yes, there is one question from Tonga. Over to you.
Hi, Julie. This is the question just for everyone around the table here. Just on the issue that Talo just mentioned about waste to energy initiatives. How sustainable is the waste to energy initiatives in the Pacific? I know that I'm not sure for Fafetai, I think you will need to confirm this, but I'm not sure whether there's any in the Pacific Island countries, but from the proposal that we have received so far in Tonga, there's none that I consider sustainable in the long term. So it's just a question to those around the table here. It's how sustainable is this in the Pacific, and in your expert opinion, do you think it's something that we would consider in the long run, or is it something that will end up problematic for us in the end? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Regarding waste to energy, I think the quick answer to your question is we have to look at existing practices that are currently operating and the lessons learned from those countries that have waste to energy. I think for the past project proposal on waste to energy that we helped to review, I think that the main aspects that we identified is the sustainability. I think countries are not ready to operate those very expensive facilities. If you look at the Japan that has a history of 100 more years on waste to energy, we learned from smaller plants in Okinawa that those plants didn't last. If you look at Okinawa economy in the scale compared to the Pacific Islands, it's something that we need to think about. Technology is very expensive, and then maybe we don't have the expertise to operate, and also the waste volume not sustainable to operate those plants. Looking at plants at 100 ton on a daily basis, most countries will not afford or not able to produce those. So we may change the waste management hierarchy from reduction and reuse to promotion of waste in order to support those plans. So I think in terms of disaster waste, the waste energy is helpful when disaster happen because you can generate that waste. But the problem disaster will not happen on a daily basis to generate that waste to be used in that kind of technology. But it's, I mean, we are evolving and things are improving. Perhaps in a few more years, we may come with a better technology for waste to energy. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mimura-san would like to add a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I'm Satoru Mimura, Chief Advisor of JPrism 2, and I have been dealing with the disaster, post-disaster recovery in Tohoku region after the Great East Japan earthquake, and I actually worked with municipalities of the affected areas in Japan, and please let me say that waste to energy approach is not realistic for disaster waste, because even in Japan, the waste to, the incineration of disaster waste is very costly, and we abandoned to do that after Great East Japan earthquake, and we try to recycle it, and more than 90% of debris and sludges were recycled. And yeah, you know that debris and sludges are not easy to burn it. So I think recycle the debris as much as possible is the most realistic approach, not only for the Pacific Islands, but the developed country like Japan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this additional comment. So I'm sorry, we will need to move with the second presentation because of the time. So our second speaker is Mr. Fatai Sagapudele. I'm very sorry. He has been the Assistant Chief Advisor for JPrism phases 1 and 2 since 2011. He has been involved in disaster waste management since 2009 as a JICA consultant for the Samoa Tsunami Disaster Waste Management Project. Under JPrism 1 and 2, he has been involved in disaster waste management activities, emergency and recovery operations in Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, and Solomon Islands. And he participated in the development of the regional disaster waste management guideline. So Fatai will present us this guideline now. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you who are able to participate this time. My presentation is based on the regional disaster waste management guideline. On your left of the slide, that's the current guideline, and it's available on the spread website, and also the Facebook website of the Disaster Waste Group. Development of the guideline, we follow this process. We did a review of existing guidelines, which is made in the UNEP 2011, the Asia Pacific 2018, and some other relevant documents. It formed the basis of the guideline, and using the past disaster waste management pilot projects implemented by JPrism and JICA in 2009 and between 2011 to 2016, we were able to form the first draft document. And that was, we did consultation workshops with JPrism countries and also some invited other countries who spread. And we are able to come with a final document after review by different groups, including spread and also other universities and international experts. So I'm mainly talking about this guideline. The purpose, objectives, and goal. Mainly, it provides a guidance on applicable disaster waste management measures to Pacific Islands based on the Pacific Island issues and challenges. Bearing in mind that the Pacific Islands do not have maybe the same setup with other developed countries. So this guideline really highlight and emphasize the weaknesses and strengths in the Pacific Islands. The objectives is to mainstream the disaster waste into Pacific Islands and national disaster management planning process for improvement of coordination of preparedness, response, and recovery operations. It also look at the improving of the supporting institutional arrangements and support for disaster waste. With the overall goal of improving Pacific Islands disaster waste management capacity. And the three rationale for developing this guideline, as mentioned earlier by our first speaker, it's one of the area covered by the FRDP, and it's also a main focus of the regional waste management strategy, the Cleaner Pacific 2025. Also picks Pacific Island countries highly exposed and vulnerable to natural hazards like tropical cyclones, floods, volcanoes, tsunami, and etc. And those events generate a lot of generated disaster waste to be managed. And third, to promote the management of disaster waste to Pacific Islands based on international accepted practices, measures, and approaches. These are the images of some of the past disaster waste projects that we involved, mainly those on your left top, mainly the tsunami in Samoa, 2009, and bottom images from flooding in Samoa and Fiji. How the guideline will help Pacific Island countries. Firstly, it will enhance the skills and knowledge of Pacific Islands on measures to promote during the different stages of disaster management. During the prevention and mitigations, preparedness and response, recovery and reconstruction. So the guideline highlight measures before disaster and after disaster. Yeah, how the guideline would improve PICS capacity. Example like one, the prevention and mitigation measures. Some of the example that existing in Pacific Islands is promoting of sourcing in the country of relief good if possible, like water bottles, the use of local options. We saw in Vanuatu, the use of local foods as support after disaster. The regular maintenance of trees along public roads, which will help to minimize the green waste during cyclones. Also the use of local wind-resistant trees. We have some of the local tree species that we can plant as landscaping or urban landscaping. That will help to reduce a lot of green waste that generated during these events. The management of existing asbestos is some of the work that we should have looked at to identify any existing asbestos in any facilities, government infrastructure or houses, and remove them while before disaster. preparedness measures, looking at promoting of improvement of existing waste management system and services. This is more important. We cannot directly move to improve disaster waste management without having existing waste management services. If we don't have disposal services and collection services, then promoting disaster waste will not help. We need to work on our improving of our collection service and disposal facilities in order for us to improve our disaster waste management. So some of the example, the maintenance of disposal site access roads before cyclone season. That's something that always overlooked by disposal site administrators. It is needed continuation of and the maintenance of this site before the rainy season. Also, the improvement of existing other collection services. The integration of disaster waste management in big national disaster management plans. Through the development of a national disaster waste management plan with countries. For example, we are collaborating with PAC Waste, Prism, in the development of plans for countries. Prism is covering Samoa, Tonga, Vanuatu, and Solomon Islands. And these plans are based on NTMO's acts and existing plans. We align development of these plans with their conditions. Also looking at the establishment of disaster waste cluster or cluster, I think PAC Waste is doing good work on that. And also Tonga already established a disaster waste subcluster as a good example. And some countries are currently progressing on similar development. Development of disaster waste management plan. So some of the draft images of the plans that have been drafted, and now with Samoa, Tonga, Solomon Island, and Vanuatu to undergo the approval process in line with the existing approval procedures by NDMO. Also develop some educational materials based on the guidelines. Sometimes maybe people find it hard or they don't have the time to look and go through the guideline. So we develop simple flyers and currently share with Disaster Waste Management Group Facebook, which summarize the main and key measures to follow during the disaster. The setup of disaster waste assessment system. This is one of the areas that are promoted in preparedness. So in Tonga, Solomon Islands, Samoa, and Vanuatu, we have worked in cooperation with the key agencies there to set up the system that can be used to assess and collect data after an event of a disaster. Our colleague from the Waste Authority Limited in Tonga will present the findings and some requests based on the lessons learned from that data collection system established for disaster waste. In terms of emergency response, yeah, that's the rapid assessment, as I just mentioned. The guideline promote some of the assessment approaches to use and provide the procedures on how to focus on the response measures, which the priority is looking at the clearance of roads and also to contain any hazardous waste that pose health risks to the public and the environment. asbestos is one of that kind of waste that need to be identified earlier and contained. Recovery measures. This has been discussed on the recovery of reusable and recyclable waste, mainly damaged iron roofing materials that can be reused. And disaster in Samoa and other Vanuatu and other countries have proven the potential reuse of iron roof damage during cyclones. Some of them can be used for fencing works and also other applicable reuse measures. The reuse of wood, fallen trees woods or firewood supplies is one of the very good example of that reuse of waste material. Most of some Pacific islands in rural areas still use traditional methods for cooking, and the use of firewood is very important. Same with recovery of recyclable waste for recycling purposes. In Samoa, I think Tonga and other countries, we work with recycling companies in collaboration during disaster waste, and they help to recover a lot of waste which divert large quantities of scrap metals away from landfills. Continuation of that recovery measures, the restoration of cleanliness. I think when the communities are affected during disaster, one of the things that they really want is the restoration of cleanliness as soon as possible. It will help them to restore the affected zone, and looking at the waste is something that's not good for most of the affected families. If we're able to clean waste as soon as possible, that will help that. Some of the images there before and after our cleaning works in Samoa and also Fiji and Tonga. The guideline also promote the reconstruction of affected waste management facilities. This is something that mostly overlooked during recovery operations. It's reconstruction of affected waste facilities. We hear that if we don't improve those affected facilities, then the capacity of these facilities to respond when disaster strikes will be highly affected. So it's very important that any affected waste facilities, include rubbish trucks when they are damaged, must be restored and repaired, including disposal facilities. And now Mara landfill in Lampasa is a very good example of that. And the reconstruction of Hofa landfill in 2015, it promotes that reconstruction and rebuilding works of any damaged facilities in order to continue in the services of these facilities. I think that's my last slide. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. So please feel free to ask any questions, or if you want to share comments on this disaster waste management guideline. If there is no questions or comments, I have one question for you, because you have been working on disaster waste management for a very long time now. and you supported many countries in organizing disaster waste management. So for you, what is the main challenges you had to face organizing response and waste management after the disaster?
It depends on the extent and the intensity of the disaster. For example, the recent volcano and tsunami disaster in Tonga, the importance of communication, when the communication broke down, the internet and telephone, we were not able to communicate with our colleagues. So it's something that was one of the key challenges, is establishing that first communication to find out what they really need, and we take it from there. So it's one of the good examples of having the guideline. When we were not able to contact Tonga, we would just imagine what they really need, and then we were able to move forward with ordering of the materials and other things before we heard from them. And the capacity of our colleagues, bearing in mind sometimes when disaster happen, people who are working under the waste are also involved with Ministry of Environment supporting response to the NDMO. So sometimes some of these staff are all moved to the emergency response office, and then it may affect the capacity to organize a response particular.
Thank you. So there is a question from Lola in Tonga. So Lola, you can ask the floor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Fafetai. Thank you for the team in Spirit. I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you, Fafetai, for your presentation. As we're talking about the challenges with the managing of disaster waste, as Waste Authority is authorized as the operational company to collect the waste for Tonga, not only for Tonga Tapu, but also the outer islands. The main challenges that we faced, and Fafetai touched on this with his presentation, is mainly the infrastructure and the facilities to manage the disaster waste with the experience that we had after the volcanic eruption. I know we have the normal trucks now, but it's not vehicles and equipments equipped to manage the disaster waste. Normal trucks, we need vehicles like a crane truck because there's bulky waste that needs to be lifted and collected. And that's the main challenge that we face. It's lacking the facility and the infrastructure, the proper infrastructure to manage the disaster waste. With the previous disaster that happened, our team from the office had to join the collection team as well because the normal collection was running, and also our team from the office had to go out and help out. And it was a time that was very challenging because of the ashes. The safety of our staff was paramount, but it was also, they were also at risk because of the dust and also the heat. And I know that this may be an internal issue here in Tonga, but I know there were some assistants that were meant to come to Waste Authority through focal point, but some of those things did not reach us. So I just wanted to highlight that point, that it would be good that we note these things when we do these plans, and we make these plans for national plan for managing of natural disasters, that we make sure that these WASH clusters, that we work together, and because we are the ones that comes in after the disaster to collect these waste, and all these things end up at landfill, which is a whole lot of process, and it's also costly. That we also should take into consideration when we make these plans, and for Tonga as well to put into our plan. But I just wanted to make a comment on that. But I would also like to acknowledge Chairperson and Spread for the Kobo Toolbox, and Stalin will do his presentation after this with more information. but they assisted us with during the disaster with some of protective gears and some of the aid that came through. So I would like to acknowledge that too from the government of Japan and also SPEP and also the help of Fafitai to our team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No? Okay, because there is another question from Tonga. So, or comment.
Hi, Julie. Can you hear me? No, we're going mute here. Hi,
No, it's
Julie.
okay, it's okay.
It's just a comment on the Fafitai presentation, and what Fafitai mentioned after his presentation is that I just wanted to say that Fafitai reaching out to Tonga is not the first time. He had reached out to Tonga following Cyclone Kita and also Cyclone Harold. I think it's easy for Fafitai because he knows who is the contact person for disaster waste in Tonga. So he straight after the first day after the event, Fafitai tried to reach us. And in the case of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai disasters, even with the limited communication, Fafitai tried everything to reach out to me. Even contacted a mutual friend of ours on Facebook to write to me and to let me know that he's on standby and JICA is on standby to assist us if there's a need. But even that, Fafitai could read our mind and what we needed, especially with the volcanic ashes falling on our island and also the tsunami. And he made the call to dispatch the appropriate equipment for us to enable our cleanup effort. So for that, I can't say thank you enough to Fafitai and also JICA for always reaching us to us. That is the sort of assistance that us member countries appreciate it very much in our time of need. So and having Fafitai develop this national disaster waste management plan for us is an added bonus for us, so that we are better prepared for the next one, and also to guide us and also the potential for us to seek funding assistance from potential donors to be able to provide the necessary equipment and the necessary support for us to for our response effort, to carry out our response effort successfully. So so it's just a comment, and thank you Fafitai for that, and also Julie and the SWAP project for building on what JICA is doing and building on that to strengthen our capacity in terms of the pilot projects, and also having this wonderful workshop for us to share our experiences and also learn from those. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, Philo, for your comment. I do want to add something. So okay, so thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we are very late on our schedule, so I propose that we stop this first part, and we can discuss further later because we have other question and answer sessions. So just for information, our third speaker, Ms. Molly Nielsen, will apologies, but she won't be able to attend the workshop today. So we will start after the break with Setoa. So Setoa, if you can be prepared for the next section, please. So we will have 15 minutes break now, and for the people who are attending the workshop in Hub, like in Samoa, there is a catering. Sorry for the other one. My apologies for that. And so we will come back in 15 minutes, so at 2:30. But just before the break, I will ask you if you can turn on your camera for a group photo. Yeah. So maybe I will. I don't, Christian, let us know when it's okay. Thank you. If you want to join. No?
It's cool.
Yeah, someone.
It's going to smile. Beautiful.
That's right.
Cool. You should think if I do.
Is it okay, Christian?
We have more people joining. Right. Want to take the first one? Smile, please. There we go. Perfect. Take another one. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So see you in 15 minutes.
Thank
And
you.
it's catering food outside. Please, coffee, TV outside.
Whiskey, beers.
Oh, no, we don't have that.
Discuss this later. So yes, we will start our second part of this workshop. So it's mainly on experience and sharing and lessons learned from Pacific countries. So we will start with Samoa and the presentation from Setoa Apo, who is the Principal Solid Waste Management Officer at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Samoa. Setoa has been working in the waste sector for 12 years as a Principal Solid Waste Management Officer under the Division of Environment and Conservation at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. He was also involved in the development of the National Waste Management Strategy 2010-2023 under the GPRISM2 project, and was involved in the, that will be endorsed soon. And he is currently looking after the waste collection services and the landfill operation and maintenance services. And he is also involved in the development of the waste collection monitoring system. So Setoa, if you want to start your presentation, please, thank you. I don't know if Setoa is back with us. Okay, so maybe to avoid wasting time, So maybe we can continue with Rosalind's presentation, and then we will come back with Setoa. So sorry. So Rosalind is a senior officer, chemical and ozone of the Department of Environmental Protection and Conservation in the Ministry of Climate Change, Adaptation, Meteorology, Geohazards in Vanuatu. So Rosalind, can I ask if you can start your presentation, and then we will come back to Setoa. Is it okay?
Okay.
Christian, can you share Rosalind's presentation, please? My screen on. Thank you. Yes, Rosalind, you have the floor.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Julie and SWAP team. Thank you, Julie and the SWAP team at SCRAP to have us to share our experience in the work on disaster waste management here in Vanuatu. I am presenting on behalf of our division here, and INA is also present. We also apologize. We were not able to have other colleagues like the NDMO. It would have been nice for them to be part of this, but somehow we didn't get to have that organized. So just us here in the department, joining with the team here, joining with the webinar here. Thank you. Next slide.
This is not my presentation.
It doesn't look like mine.
Yes, maybe you can go down. Yeah. No, it's in this one, but maybe you can start with the
Go down, go down.
presentation after the photo of the man. No, Abia, can you share the presentation again, please? Yeah, this one. Yes, can you share Rosalind's presentation? Thank you. Yes, and start.
I think it's almost 12th slide.
So, yes, next. This one or next? Yes, and start with no, the slide just after the picture. No,
It's
This is the one. Go back.
yeah, this one. Thank you.
I want to.
No, go down, please. Oh, the next one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one.
Thank you.
Yes.
If- Again.
Yes, so we shall just share to you the initiatives and that have been undertaken here and for disaster waste management and tropical cyclone responses and challenges. Okay, so go back to the previous slide. Yes, thank you. So we to prepare for disaster waste management, there were other activities that led up to that, and we would like to acknowledge the trainings that were conducted in Vanuatu in November of 2019, and we acknowledge the Canadian government through the joint coordination with SPREP, JECA J-Prison 2 project, and the University of Newcastle, who did a training for stakeholders in Vanuatu. Follow up from the training, there was a workshop to develop Vanuatu's national disaster waste management contingency plan. And again, we acknowledge PrEP and J-Prison 2 team experts for their commitment to undertake this with the government here in Vanuatu. Okay, next slide. So following the trainings that happened, and then soon after, we did have this tropical cyclone Harold, which affected not only Vanuatu, but other countries in the region. And a rapid assessment was made. The tropical cyclone Harold affected the northern province of Vanuatu, and that involved two of our provinces, the Samar province and the Panama province. And so rapid waste assessment was done on the islands in the provinces. So the islands included here Santo, Malo, Aure, and Pentecost. Those are some of the islands in the northern part of Vanuatu. And in all the locations, the majority of waste that we found was green waste and building debris, including bulky waste such as iron roofings, timber, etc. We then had a team that went down to the islands to actually conduct some recovery efforts to move the waste. And so the table here shows some of the type of disaster waste that was recovered. You can see there, those are the again, those are the islands in the province that were where the recovery efforts were conducted at. Yeah, recyclables, bulky waste, non-recyclable waste, and we also have the total disaster waste there. Can we go to the next slide? So these are the other islands again in the two provinces. And you can see from the totals there of the amounts of the different types of waste. So we have 33 meter cube of recyclables, 124 bulky waste, non-recyclable waste, 81 or 82 meter cube. And so we had a total of about 239 meter cube of waste that was recovered at the time. I'm going straight to the challenges here. Before I talk about the challenge, that even as the recovery of the waste was conducted, there was also conduction on training to the communities also at that time. So challenges here we would like to share. Emergency response challenges, funding. First one, access to the main disaster funding from the Disaster Management Office was an issue. Other internal funding was then diverted to fund the disaster waste assessment activities. Yeah, so this is something that's an issue here for us, and we hope that our main disaster, the National Disaster Management Office, who are our main funder for when disaster happens, will work well with us in the future. But yes, despite all the efforts that we did when we went and did the assessment and efforts to prepare temporary dump site and all that, we did find all the how much it would cost and all that, but that was not supportive to us through the NDMO office. Yes, so other challenges, the delay in response. The disaster waste assessment team, which comprised of the department here and the Port Vila City Council. We undertook the assessments at least 3 weeks after the tropical cyclone Harold event happened. And I think it's just to do with the internal issues here at the department, which we hope that in future can be better coordinated so that assessments are done as soon as possible. And there was also delay in submission of assessment forms. We also had a lack of appropriate equipment and resources. You can see there we were just doing the conducting the work using phone. There was no PPE, no protective equipment, wood chippers, chainsaws, etc. And again, like I mentioned earlier, we were not able to have a temporary dump site secured. Yes, as already mentioned, we really need to strengthen the collaborations between the relevant stakeholders. And again, the assessment forms, there were revisions done on it without our knowledge, and so filling it and sending it in was that contributed to the delay of sending the assessment forms in. Next slide. Okay, so on the islands far from town, the main challenges was it was not easy to engage people to do cleanup. We did have a team, but we still needed volunteers from the community, and it was not easy because, of course, most people would at that time be busy rebuilding their homes and their gardens, their livelihoods. So it wasn't that easy. And the other challenge was, of course, you had to transport the waste from the smaller islands to the main islands. And again, that's not easy. And it was costly to find boats. Okay, so after the assessment and the work that was conducted, report, the post-disaster needs assessment report was submitted to the Prime Minister's office, and it covers both disaster waste and biodiversity recommendations, post-assessments in the report. In that period of after the cyclone, there was an outbreak of dengue fever in Luganville. Luganville is the second town to Port Vila on the island of Santo. And so there was an organized team collaboration with us in the Ministry of Health to look at that need that arose, and the department was it was fully funded by the department here. Our formal request is then sent for assistance to SPRAC and JICA. Sorry, that's supposed to be JICA there. JICA did respond, and we're thankful for that, to provide us response equipment, which is just the waste response equipment, like chainsaws and safety boots, protective gear, goggles, and Samsung tablets. And these are here at the department for any disaster that may arise in the future. Our expectations, we hope that we look forward to regional and international continuous dialogue with regional and international organizations, including SPREP, for technical and financial support. And of course, we continue to look forward to better coordination and support by in-country representatives to be in line with actual country needs after the disaster. Next slide. Yes, so after this event, the TC Harold event, there was a need that we recognized to establish a disaster waste cluster under the National Disaster Framework. So in 2021, an environment cluster was established under the National Disaster Framework. And there are two disaster waste subcluster, the biodiversity loss subcluster and the disaster waste subcluster. Next slide. Okay, so this is our, that's the structure, the disaster waste management response structure in Vanuatu. So I don't know whether you can all see that very clearly or not, but yeah. So we have the director, Department of Environmental, that's a cluster lead, our director from our department. And then under that, we have the NDMO operations manager. And man, I can't really see that clearly as well. Yes, then we have the logistical operator, DPC head of Environmental Protection Division. And then you will see that, you know, these are the ones in brown are all the different provinces. Then you would have a SHEFA, you would have an NDMO officer for the different provinces, followed on by the relevant stakeholders under each of those NDMO offices, and the waste sector partners below that. So, yeah, so that's kind of established now at our ministry. So we hope that more better collaborations will happen in the future when we have another disaster. Thank you, Tomas.
Thank you very much, Rosine, for this presentation. So if Setoa is with us, can we continue with Setoa presentation, and then we will continue with Tonga. And after that, we will have a question and answer session. So yes, please sit down.
Hi, Talofa Lama. Apologies for one of my colleagues from MDMO's not be able to join us today. But I will be presenting on our draft disaster waste response plan. Yeah, that's one. First of all, I would like to present on the background information leading to the development of our disaster waste response plan. And I would like to acknowledge the assistance from Tree Prism 2 for helping us in developing this response plan. Why is it important for us to develop this response plan? Because of we're highly exposed to natural hazards. We've been facing with frequent tropical cyclones, flooding in recent years, potential occurrence of devastating earthquakes, volcanoes with subsequent tsunamis anytime today, tomorrow, and in the future. These hazards, when occur, are destructive, as we all understand, and cause a lots of damages to our surrounding environment, houses, properties, and belongings. All these damages, yeah, of course, we know generate waste with a huge amount. So, and delaying of immediate waste management collection and disposal service can further degrade affected surrounding environment and people's health, and of course, the economy. Those are all the reason why it is important for us to manage, to develop this response plan. The next slide is some of the examples of the disasters, different hazards. Excuse me. Next slide. For example, destructive tsunami that we had in 2009, and cyclones that we had with destructive flooding in 2012. Next slide. Next slide. And of course, recently we're facing with the volcano. That's why we have these tremors recently, because there's an active volcano in nearby island American Samoa. Next slide. And of course, the pandemic that we had, of course, that we generated more waste from that, because the pandemic is a disaster event already. So there was a huge amount of plastic, all from PPEs that were used by the frontliners, and of course, all those who were working to contain the pandemic. Next slide, please. And finally, of course, the condemned relief works. Especially what I mean with this is that the expired goods that were brought in for relief works. And then we had the experience with that in 2012. Right. There are guidelines that really help us assisting with this. The national guidelines that already mentioned by Fafitai's presentation. UNEP Waste Guideline 2011, the Asia Pacific Disaster Waste Guideline 2018, developed by Japan's Ministry of Environment. And of course, we have our regional disaster guideline developed by JICA and the J-Basin 2 project. All these guidelines really, there's a need for this, all these plans to be mainstream into national disaster management plans. Next slide, please. Yes, those are response objectives, gathering some information on the waste, which is rapid assessment, follow-up operation to temporarily manage the identified risks, like clearings of block roads, seal off any area with suspicious hazardous chemicals and other hazardous waste, and collection of animal carcasses before they get smelly, and then follow up detailed assessment for recovery operation planning, which provides some answers to what to do next, who will do it, what supporting resources needed, and how much and where to get it from. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, here I'm going to present mainly for our disaster waste management response plan. Next slide. First is the purpose. So the purpose is to provide detailed response plan and actions to ensure effective management of disaster waste based on the international and regional disaster waste management guidelines. Outline key roles and responsibilities of key government agencies and stakeholders based on the existing waste management related functions as government agency and supporting partners. And of course, highlight coordination and communication processes, mobilization of resources for effective execution and implementation based on NTMO processes. Objectives: mainstreaming disaster waste management into the National Disaster Management Plan, promoting appropriate disaster waste management practices in line with regional and international guidelines, enhance national coordination of disaster waste response and recovery operations, sharing of resources and avoid duplication of efforts, and finally securing or supporting resources for restoring cleanliness and effective waste management facilities to resume essential waste services. Slide. The legal basis, well, under the National Disaster Management Act, Part A, Section 1, it says authorize the Disaster Advisory Committee to invite any agency or organization to develop a disaster management plan, which may become a part of the National Disaster Management Plan. So that means it requires every designated response agency to prepare a response plan based on the following aspects. First, identify the types of disaster or emergencies likely to require a response by the agency and the nature of anticipated effects of disasters or emergencies on the agency. Second, identify activities and procedures. Third, include any implementation plan in relation to the matters identified under paragraph A and B of the Act. Plan for the speediest possible recovery. Next slide, please. And of course, requires every designated response agency to prepare a response plan. So this is the reason why we have to develop this response plan. Next slide. Under the Waste Management Act, it's an overarching and principal act for overall management of waste, all type of waste, and authority to assign waste collection areas, official disposal sites, contractors to deliver these waste services, and development of national waste management plans, policies, regulation, national standards, promotion of recycling, enhancing public awareness in the sector, etc. Scope covers extremely hazardous high as identified in the National Disaster Management Plan 2017-2020 under revision now, focus on the specific response actions to manage disaster waste when disasters and hazards occur. Key hazards that are already in the plan. So these are the hazards that we have identified from the National Disaster Management Plan. We have cyclone, they are extreme, and the period is from November to April, so we are now in the cyclone season. Volcanic eruptions are predictable, the same as tsunami, and urban fire too. Public health crisis is predictable. Flooding is high, coincide with our disaster cyclone season. Earthquake is unpredictable. Landslide mainly during our wet season from November to April. Forest fires mainly from dry season. Actually, it's from May to October. Next slide. Linked to other plans, we do have Regional Disaster Waste Management Guidelines 2022, the National Waste Management Strategy 2019-23, National Healthcare Waste Management Strategy, the National Marine Spill Contingency Plan, Technical Guidance to COVID-19 Waste Storage Collection and Disposal, Technical Guidance to Asbestos and Containment and Removal, and plus we do have our ministry's business continuity plan when we have disasters. The key stakeholders is our Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, deals with cyclone, flood, earthquake, volcano, and tsunami. Ministry of Health, public health crisis pandemic. Ministry of Work, Transport and Infrastructure, mainly they deal with landslides, vessel and marine oil spill. Our Samoa Fire and Emergency Service Authority, they deal mainly with fire. Above agencies are designated response agencies for the different hazards covered under this plan. Next slide. Agency with waste management relative function, MNRE, which means your natural resources and environment, government solid waste collection services, 2 waste disposal sites on Polo Island and Savai Island. Ministry of Health, collection of healthcare waste from hospitals and operation of 2 waste incinerators on both May Islands. Samoa Water Authority, they deal with sewage treatment plants here in town. Ministries of Agriculture and Fisheries, they are the quarantine incinerators operations. Ministry of Women, they deal with village cleanups, coordination with our National Beautification Committee. The Ministry of Health, they deal mainly of end-of-life assets, especially electronics. Samoa Tourism Authority, waste collection from tourism and development resorts. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Hello.
So
Yeah.
I think we're going here.
Sorry, Seto,
It's all right.
we missed you. There is a technical issue.
Christian, are you able to share Seto's presentation?
It's okay. Can I use my laptop or?
Presentation.
No, Seto, I think Seto presentation is finished.
We've got 3 more slides.
Oh, sorry, but so I think you can continue, and it's just our here, right?
It's
It doesn't
just about resource mobilization to continue from there.
can continue.
Resource mobilization slide. The resource mobilization. No, go further down. No, go back. Next one, yes, resource mobilization. The plan contribution as part of the different agency and stakeholders waste management function are listed in the plan. Support from development partners similar to previous contributions as summarized in the plan, like contribution from JICA, SPREP, supporting budget from the government, collection and disposal services, supporting budget as part of the National Disaster Recovery Plan for recovery efforts. Next slide. Next slide. Communication process, as that's the main point of this plan, is to share enough plan to mainstream it under the National Disaster Management Plan. She had distributed to all members of the Council, National Disaster Council, government, stakeholders, level of awareness, support, and better coordination. Second is communication related to the plan implementation. And lastly, communication must follow the standard procedure prior to reporting to the national TMO and should follow NTMO's communication process. Next slide. Yeah, that's my final slide. Our draft response plan is now with TMO, and the next Disaster Advisory Committee meeting, and they will present the response plan for approval. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sita, for your presentation. So now we will continue with the session by sharing the experience and lessons learned from Tonga, which was unfortunately affected by the volcano eruption and the tsunami in January 2022. So it was planned to introduce this session by sharing a video, but unfortunately we have delayed our schedule. So I think we will delay this presentation, but I will share with you the video later. So this one was a short cut of a full documentary, a 30-minute documentary. So we will share with you later both the teaser and the documentary. But I would like to have this opportunity to share my gratitude to all the participants who agreed to be part of this documentary, because I can see lots of people in Tonga who will be part of the documentary. I saw the first draft and it's very emotional, and yes, we can see how affected and still after 1 year how affected people. So thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this documentary, and I hope I will be able to share this as soon as possible. So I suggest that we continue with our first speaker from Tonga. So Mr. Liliami Ontario Tongamana, with the Inter-Cluster Coordinator for the National Emergency Management Office in Tonga. He was previously the coordinator for Health, Nutrition and WASH cluster led by the Ministry of Health. He currently hosts a Master of Public Health with a specialization in public security from the University of New South Wales, focusing in health aspects of disasters, emergency management and crises, including epidemics. So over to you, Lee. Thank you.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Oh, sorry. Hello. So first and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our Tonga's partners, also our colleague from the regions. I will just do a very short presentation on behalf of Tarek Taponimo and TPT Tareka on the disaster management structures and function that is used in Tonga. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please. Yeah, so today I'm just going to briefly talk about the scope and mandate of the office, as well as the other function. But this slide basically focuses on, I think most of us are aware of the disaster management cycle, which pretty much highlights the role that the National Emergency Management Office and its partner stakeholders, such as the Department of Environment that we are present here together today in the disaster management cycle around preparedness, response, recovery, and prevention, which I think we can all agree that what we do now is prevention and preparedness is a key area of disaster management that we are working on. Drafting guidelines and finalizing standard operating procedures and all those documents. So comes disaster, when we respond and recovery, the coordination platform and structures and systems is already there to assist us in having a better coordinated response. Next slide, please. So basically, the scope and mandate of the National Emergency Management Office, I think the key word here is coordination. Around the disaster management cycle that we saw in the previous slide is disaster preparedness, coordinate the plan. First and foremost, the office itself has to have some contingency planning. We also encourage other ministries, stakeholders through clusters to also have some sort of contingency planning that might include resource allocation and budgeting as well to assist with response to disaster. I think around disaster response, it's very much clear. National and international partners, including the civil and military coordination. I think we witnessed that aspect after the previous Humatoma Palpai, where we had a lot of international partners assisted, including spread and regional organizations as well, in responding to the disaster. So the office is pretty much as a focal point. We work together again, emphasizing the cluster system, because for us here in Toma, we see this as our working arm and our eyes and ears in the community. So pretty much disaster response, we also coordinate assessments. I think that's a key aspect of the disaster, is to really identify what is the needs of the crowd, the damage and the loss on the crowd, and that how we will prioritize our response, which always and often in our experience, disaster waste is one of those key priority immediately after the disaster, as the previous presenters have presented in their presentation, to enable road to for logistics to reach and humanitarian aid to reach those affected communities. We always need to have the roads clear and all those bulky waste have been collected before we can enable those humanitarian relief items to reach those affected areas. And around the last point, disaster recovery and protection. Again, it's work together alongside with our cluster system. Especially some of the clusters are very much focused on economic and social recovery, which they are very active in this stage of emergency. To really look at what are the recovery priority after the response and to the disaster. Yeah, next slide, please. So I just want to briefly capture, I think, the new disaster risk management bill, where we are now, trying to move on with our CEO has highlighted that it's a new era here in Toma to move from being reactive or emergency management to having a more proactive role in disaster management or disaster risk management. So I think one of the key changes in this bill is to emphasize not just on emergency management, but also on disaster risk management, which may include what are the risks that the infrastructure might have that related to this workshop. We can have a look at the landfill, the facility that our colleague in Toma has talked about, equipment before. So those are the kind of paradigm shift that we wanted to move on, to really look at the risk of the facility, physical buildings, and also social environmental risk that might be, be able to mitigate before it can really cause disaster when an event happens. So also a second point of this disaster risk management bill is the legalizing of the cluster system, which include establish a function and responsibility. In saying that the current practice that we use is that was a cabinet decision that we endorsed by the parliament to use cluster system after Cyclone Ian in 2014, and saying that that cluster system, wanted to have those legal framework in order to operationalize in the parliament and the country as well. So having that aspect of the cluster system be legalized in the new disaster risk management bill is one of the key highlight for us in saying that I think the current practice globally is that the clusters are only active when there's a disaster response. But our ideas here in the we wanted to empower them during preparedness phase, with their standard operating procedure, with their guidelines, and with their framework, so that they can be able to well prepared when a disaster happens. So hence, that's the reason why we push for the cluster system to recognize legally within that new disaster risk management bill. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is briefly looking at the disaster management structure from a national level to a district and village management committee. Sorry, to the village level, or otherwise we call the community level. I think around the other Pacific country, they might have a different language from district. For us, they might call it a province, but here in Tonga, district is basically meaning the outer island district, which we have around 5 or 6, six island district here in Tonga. So each of the island have those emergency management committee. But at the national level, there are 3. At the current National Emergency Management Act, there are 3 separate committees. But in the new new disaster risk management bill, those 3 separate committees will be come under one, and they will be subdivided into subcommittee. But the current Emergency Management Act 2007, there are 3 separate committees: NEMC, NELC, and NDRC, which have its core members, but also have its co-op members as well, depending on the type of disaster happens. And the chairman, which is the minister for the Ministry of Mayday, decide if someone can be included as a member of these 3 separate committees. The NEMO is a secretary along those 3 committees. And then also comes the next level is the clusters, which is at the moment is at the national level. But of course, we are trying to empower it to be at the district level as well, given the presence of some of the leading agency of the district level. And of course, the village emergency management committee is at the village level. I think one of the challenges that we have at the moment, although the structure existed, but of course there's no perfect structure. So I think that the interoperability of the among these different levels is one of the key highlights that we wanted to strengthen. Given the COVID-19, we had a very good lesson learned, and also the how to really make sure that the communication from village to district to the national level is being strengthened as well. So one of the key highlights that we are looking at as well is to really strengthen those communication between those committees. Next slide, please. This is the national cluster structure here in Tonga, I think we all aware of the objective of the cluster system is for better coordination and similar arrangement as well. Here in Tonga, that every cluster, currently there are 11 clusters, although there's only 10 shown in the slide, but there are one new cluster that has been recently established to really focus on the evacuation center management. So that will be led by the Ministry of Medic as well, co-lead with the International Organization for Migration. So around this cluster system, as in the aware, every cluster is led by a government ministry, and then co-lead by either a regional organization like some of the UN and WHO in international. And each of the cluster also have its members as well from different organization, government, non-government, and private sectors as well, that have their activities related to each of those operation areas. So as today's workshop focus on disaster waste management, the next slide, if you please, you can also go to the next slide, highlight how the link that the waste management to this cluster system. Yeah, sorry, you can go to the next slide, please. So the next slide at the far right again really highlight how the waste management, which is led by the Department of Environment under the Ministry of Medtech, and its core functions. Apologies that I haven't really updated my presentation, but there are two functions that are very crucial to the waste management subcluster led by Leo and her team, was the bulky waste as well as the asbestos. But these are some of the functions that are listed here, like household collection and liquid waste management authority. But of course, in their current function, waste management also had those functions in their portfolio regarding the bulky waste and the asbestos. So that pretty much sum up. Yeah, you can see the structure, that the waste management subcluster is under the health, nutrition, and waste cluster, which is chaired by the CEO for health, which the CEO for health is also a member of the National Emergency Management Committee. As I said before, is the highest level decision-making committee in the national disaster management structure. And as you can see, the role of NEMO is a secretariat to the NEMC. So that pretty much the linkage between the waste management and the health, nutrition, and waste cluster. Of course, there are other free subclusters as well, and they may have overlapping role, like water, sanitation, and health, nutrition, and cluster. So that's pretty much the structure of the HF waste cluster in Tonga. I think the next slide, please, will be my last slide. So that pretty much highlight all the points that I try to emphasize, and how we see our cluster system is our working arms and eyes in the community. They are working around us at NEMO and the NEOC, which is the National Emergency Operations Center, where we really try to provide logistics and coordination functions to all those clusters, especially during their response. But as I said before, we encourage the clusters to operate during preparedness, with their document like guidelines, plans, operating procedures, those sort of preparedness that are relevant for their response to be well conducted. So I think all in all, I think that's how the disaster management is being operated or conducted here in Tonga. So I think thank you for this opportunity. If any questions, I sure can pass on to my colleague here. We can collectively try to answer your question as much as we can. Malo.
Thank you very much. So we continue with Tonga and with Mafileo. So Mafileo Ongosiamasi is a deputy director with 15 years of experience working alongside the executive team of the Department of Environment. Mafileo is the head of the Waste Management and Pollution Control Divisions of the Department of Environment and is responsible for managing the division, including the cluster lead from managing disaster waste. Over to you, Leo. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie. So I'll be presenting continue on from Williami, from my colleague Williami from NEMO. So my presentation will focus on Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai volcanic eruption and tsunami disasters national cleanup campaign. Next slide, please. So the outline of my presentation, it's a very quick one. I'm just going to talk about the actual disaster itself and also our response and recovery efforts and also the challenges. And the challenges. So just a quick snapshot. This was taken from the internet, of course, general information on the 19th of January 2022. Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai volcanic submarine volcano in Tonga erupted violently, causing tsunami in Tonga, but not only in Tonga, but also included Fiji, American Samoa, Vanuatu, along the Pacific Rim, including New Zealand, Japan, United States, the Russia Far East, and also South America, Chile, and Peru. At least 2 people here in Tonga were killed, and some were injured from waves up to 20 meters high. It was the largest volcanic eruption since 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo, and the most powerful eruption since 1883 eruption of Krakatoa. I think NASA estimated this was the most powerful volcanic eruption. I mean, 10 times more powerful than the atomic bomb that was dropped in Hiroshima in terms of atmospheric explosion. So all in all, I think we were so lucky to have survived such a catastrophic event. So this is just a snapshot of what happened to Tonga after. So as you can see, the pictures on your left-hand side is an island covered by volcanic ashes. Actually, it's just it's like watching a movie, a black and white movie. And on your left-hand side, right-hand side, it's the coastal areas that were heavily impacted by the incoming tsunami. Next slide, please. This picture actually tells a story. This is one of the outer islands in Tonga that was severely impacted. So this is from Mango Island in Hapai. So as you can see, people had to they had to wait overnight for the disaster to finish, and that was the only highest point they could find on site, and they had no shelter, but they had each other. And on the picture on your right, that's when they were rescued and brought back to the main island. I think it was that picture tells the story of just being happy to be alive at the time. Next slide, please. So our response and recovery effort, I'm not going to go into details about how that goes, because it's already been mentioned by my colleague from NEMO. So the waste management subcluster is under the WASH cluster. So what we were required to develop was a Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcanic eruption and tsunami disaster waste response plan, which was endorsed by the National Emergency Management Committee and also Cabinet. The lead agency is the Department of Environment, and we had supporting agency, the Ministry of Health, Waste Authority Limited, Prime Minister's Office, JICA, DFAT, His Majesty Army Forces, Ministry of Police, Tonga Red Cross Society, No Plastic campaign, and also our local communities. Next slide, please. So this is our cleanup effort. The first is the street cleanup, which was mainly done by His Majesty Army Forces. We're fortunate that we have them in place because we needed manpower, especially with clearing of access to affected areas, and also with the amount of volcanic ashes that we received at the time, we had no idea how to deal with them. So, and because people were facing a lot of difficulty breathing the air that was circulated at the time, we had to move fast and clean the streets to avoid air pollution at the time. So we had our army forces assisted us, especially in the public areas, and also the community did their own cleanup, and people were encouraged to wear masks and also use water, but then use less, because at the time we were facing a drought, so water was scarce at the time, and also people were asked, those that have medical that have medical difficulty, or we're encouraged to stay indoors, and then to stay indoors during the process. So it was very, very, very hard during this time. Next slide, please. The next one was the community cleanup. I think it's the same with all Pacific Island countries. Straight after disaster, the first thing that any community or any household would do is the cleanup. The reason why that's what we do normally is because we want to get back to as normal as possible. So the first thing is the cleanup. So in this case, it was done as a community. The community came together and worked together, and then they did community cleanup, village cleanup, which accelerated our effort in the cleanup even with very limited equipment at the time. We made do with what we had to clean up as much as possible, because the last thing we needed was to have another epidemic like dengue fever. And so because of the amount of water that was left, and also those containers that might have water in them, it's a breeding grounds for mosquitoes. So that's why we made the cleanup effort straight after the event. Next slide, please. The next one is the bulky waste collection, and this one is a very popular event here in Tonga after a disaster, because the bulky waste collection, this is where we collected bulky items from affected areas, and that could include damaged buildings, green waste, any other electrical items that was damaged by the volcanic ashes. I have to admit that because we left the house and it was wide open, our TV didn't seem to work after that, and I assume it's because it was there were volcanic ashes might get into the TV and ruin the electrical circuits and so forth. So there were quite a lot of household items as well included in this bulky waste collection. So we have managed to cover 80% of Tongatapu, but we still have another 20% to complete this task. Next slide, please. So this is the relief supplies, plastic containers. As you were aware that we did receive a lot of relief supplies from our donor partners and also just from friends and families overseas. So a lot of those relief supplies were plastic bottles and also plastic containing products. So because we had a lot of plastic, empty plastic bottles going into the landfill site, this was an initiative led by the No Plastic campaign together with Waste Authority Limited. So what they did was that they requested support from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia because they had a Navy ship here in Tonga. So they requested if there's a machinery to compact plastic waste, and fortunately they did. They had two plastic compactors on board, so they gave that to us, to the team, and also which helped compacted a lot of the collected plastic bottles. And then because at the time the landfill site was almost reaching its full capacity, so it makes sense that they asked the Navy ship, the Australia, to take it back because they came into Tonga full, and when they went back it was empty. So it makes sense to have them taken back for proper recycling in Australia. Next slide, please. So the challenges here is that the first one is the remote location of the affected areas. It was very hard for us to reach those islands, especially when everything else is happening here on the mainland. But again, we were fortunate that we had those Navy ship on our shores that they did those work for us. They had the capacity, they had the knowledge, and they also had the equipment. Even those barge that can go right up to the island, and then all of a sudden they change into a vehicle and then start running around in the island. So we were lucky we had that support in country, and that exercise also gave hope to those affected areas, because when they see those foreigners coming in to assist them, it gave them hope. It made them smile just looking at the helicopters and flying around, and also those vehicles running around. So it gave those people hope and put a smile in their face, considering the devastation that they went through in January 15. Limited communication was a huge challenge for us. I think ever since January 15, our internet connection was out, and also our communication was out, local communication was out as well, international and local. So it was very hard to communicate to, especially seeking assistance from donor partners overseas. So first in the first month, we had to make do with what we had at the time. Fafita did a great job, and JICA did a great job reaching out to us and getting the supplies, necessary supplies that we needed. And again, I'm just thankful to all the donor partners. I think they could read, even with the lack of communication. I think they could read what we needed at the time. And when the ship came to Tonga, they had exactly what we needed. So, so that assisted us very well. The other one is the mentioned earlier, the lack of appropriate equipment. Like I said, we had to work on with what we had at the time. The warehouse, the Nemo warehouse, did not have the appropriate equipment in place, and I think it's because we didn't plan to have a disaster like this. We always plan to have, you know, just the normal cyclone and storm surges, drought, but not a disaster like this. So it was the first time for us in our time to experience something like this. So we didn't have that equipment in place. So we encourage people to use what they can, what they have at the time. And at the same time, conserve a lot of water, because most of our rainwater tank were contaminated by volcanic ashes. So we didn't know to what degree was that contamination went to. So people were asked not to drink from the rainwater tank. And not only that, but we were asked not to use firewood at the time, contaminated firewood at the time for cooking, because we don't even know, we weren't aware of what would happen if we start to burn those woods. You know, we weren't aware of that. We were waiting for advice from our donor partners, from the expert from overseas, to provide that sort of information to us. COVID-19 outbreak exacerbated our response effort. 1 week after the volcano eruption, COVID took over. So that further put a challenge to our effort, especially with the lockdown period. There were a lot of the implementation plan were delayed because we needed to have our IDs and everything, and even when we tried to do our work, we were stopped at one station, and other, you know, we were stopped at a series of a checkpoint station. But on the other hand, it kind of made our work easier, because everyone was staying at home at the time. So cleanup in public areas were made easier for us, because, you know, no one was around to interfere with the cleanup effort. A surplus of relief supplies mentioned earlier. We had a lot of plastic bottles, a lot of plastic containing products came into Tonga. So that added a lot of waste going into the landfill site. So we had challenges dealing with that. And then the final one is the landfill reaching its maximum capacity. I think that in this case, it happens anywhere. Because we had the household collection in place and we had the bulky waste collection at the same time, so the landfill capacity was up to its capacity at the time, not only for the landfill tip, but also to the workers as well. So what we did was that again, Whawhetai and JICA stepped in to provide fuel for heavy machineries, because they were running 24/7 at the time to keep the waste tip down. And also we also requested heavy machineries that were provided by the government of China to assist also with getting the waste tip down, so that more waste could be added, could still be added to the landfill tip. So next slide, please. So all in all, I have to say that for Tonga, I think we've got even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise again. And I think we've seen it here right now that even though we still remember what happened back in January 15, but we still have our hope and our faith, and that got us moving forward. So, and like the saying, there's always light at the other end of the tunnel, and that gave us our hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mafileo, for your optimism. Also because we will continue the presentation from Tonga with a discussion on asbestos and hazardous waste management, because this can be part of disaster waste management activities. So this presentation is delivered by Ms. Sulieti Ponji Upanga, who is PACWest Plus in-country officer in Tonga. Sulieti worked for the Department of Environment at the Ministry for Environment for almost 7 years under the Waste Management and Pollution Control Division. In August 2021, she moved to the Waste Authority Limited, which is a public enterprise, and worked as a project officer, and she's currently the national officer for PACWest Plus project, and mainly works in implementing and documenting project activities in Tonga on managing hazardous waste, including asbestos and disaster waste. So thank you, Sulieti.
Thank you. My presentation for today will be on asbestos waste disposal in Tonga. Next slide, please. Because our workshop today is based on disaster waste, my presentation will focus on asbestos waste and disposal in Tonga. So the Department of Environment under the Ministry of NADEC seeks to build the process started by PACWest and utilize the PACWest Plus Fund to improve long-term management of asbestos-containing materials in Tonga. So according to the previous natural disasters that severely impacted Tonga Tapu and the remote island groups, have highlighted the health and environmental impacts of disaster waste and asbestos debris in Tonga. So on the pictures shown on the slides are buildings in Kalobobolu village and houses in Hatafu village that was destroyed by the tsunami. And on the last photo is a photo of an asbestos house, which is partially damaged by Cyclone Harold in 2020. Next slide, please. So asbestos waste is disposed in Tapuhia landfill. So Tapuhia landfill is managed by Waste Authority Limited, which is a public enterprise. And it is the only authorized site for solid waste management disposal in Tonga Tapu. Collection services were extended to the outer islands of Oahu in 2018 and Hapai and Ewa in 2020. The Tapuhia landfill covers an area of approximately 6 hectares, dimension of 300 times 200 meters. The site is between 15 to 20 meters above sea level. Next slide, please. According to the Waste Management Act in 2005, Waste Authority Limited is the only authority for waste management collection services and disposal at the landfill in Tonga and in the outer islands. The landfill consists of 4 cells. Cell 1 is full. Cell 2 is currently used, but it has reached more than 50%. Cell 3 is planned to be constructed next year, but to be confirmed by Waste Authority. Due to the sequence of disaster waste in Tonga, it causes the landfill to fill quickly according to the plan of its lifetime. Next slide, please. So this is how asbestos is removed in Tonga and also disposed. So the first picture is an asbestos removal in Niwatoputapu Island. As we all know, whenever a asbestos removal takes place in the site, it is barricaded, mobilized with all the signs, and contractors letting people know that there is a serious work going on. And because asbestos is very risky to our health, it is a very important task to look at. So after barricading, contractors start to remove the asbestos from the roofs. And from these roofs, after removal, asbestos waste is collected in a black polyethylene plastic sheeting. So this sheeting is very secure to cover the asbestos waste, prevent it from exposing. So after collecting into the plastic sheeting, it is safely wrapped and sealed. So as you see on the fourth photo, the bottom, it is put in pallets. Because it is going to be shipped from another island to the main island, they use pallets to store the asbestos waste to make sure it is not interfered with any other waste or goods in the surroundings. So as soon as it arrives in Balofa, it is transported to the landfill, Tapuhia landfill, for proper disposal. And what I mean by proper disposal, asbestos waste is being buried in the landfill. Next slide, please. Asbestos in-country disposal opportunities. Firstly, is to reduce the environmental and health exposure impacts through long-term storage required reduced and eliminated. Second to that is the risk of exposure through long-distance transport and handling reduced. Like I mentioned before, in the remote islands, it requires transportation, and further the island, the further transportation. So this would be a risk of exposure through long distance transportation. It also cost savings can lead to more asbestos removal. And efficient and rapid disposal option becomes available for asbestos disaster debris. Second to that is to reduce climate impacts through off-island shipping eliminated and also carbon footprint reduces. And lastly, to reduce costs significantly, 4 times reduces disposal costs and available budget for more asbestos removal and cost for creating a landfill disposal cell for asbestos is low. Next slide, please. For the country priority focus of asbestos containing materials in Tonga is to develop a legislation. Why? It's because to ban the importation of asbestos or goods containing asbestos to ensure no more ACM material will arrive in Tonga. Second to that is to develop a code of practice to guide the management of handling of asbestos and to establish of asbestos inspectorate and identify the best practice for asbestos disposal at the landfill. And additional to that is just to provide trainings to border control, customs officers and local contractors, and to conduct education and awareness program. So if Tonga can do it, any island in the Pacific can do it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing this experience with on asbestos. And yes, we know that it can be also used oil or any other hazardous waste. This can be another disaster following the first disasters. Thank you very much. I don't know if someone would like to share comments or someone has questions. So there is a question from Lola in Tonga. So this floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone, and our partners from NEMO and Environment for the great presentations. I just want to make a comment and to clarify a few things that was mentioned in the presentations. Just to clarify, after the Hungatonga Hungahapai volcanic eruption, the support from government was a bit slow. So we had to reach out to donor agencies where we put out proposals, which included JPRISM and JICA, and that's where it was picked up. And when they contact us, one of the things that we requested was the field to support the team with the collection. So I had to acknowledge Bafetai and the team from JPRISM who reached out to help us during that time. The funding, which was mentioned with the support from China, I would have to say that that did not happen. We did not receive any support from the China funded to the landfill. We were hoping that the relief equipment that came through the donation would be distributed to us, as we are the authorized operation to collect the waste. But unfortunately, some of the support just came straight from donors, and we had to ask for and to apply for, which I think it's very important that I remind again to NEMO, which I have raised in many workshops here, that we need to clarify the position and the role of the operators and the regulators. Us as operators, with just looking at the disaster structure, all those functions there is what we're doing. The waste collection, the household collection, and all those functions. I understand that environment is the regulators, but I just wanted to make a comment to note that with disaster waste, with the roles and responsibilities. But and also what was mentioned with the bulky waste, it's quite popular here, yes, and I think it's also everywhere else. But we also need to look at how, because it's putting a lot of stress on the landfill, which is we're still facing now. It's one of the challenges with all this waste that's created from disasters and just the ongoing collection of all these things and the cost that goes with it to the landfill. It's also something that we need to know. The plastic baler machines was donated straight to government of Tonga. And that was gifted to us from the government. But there's also another issue with that, with these equipments that comes in. It's great that we can use it and we can bale the plastics and we started the recycling, but we also need to look at how we can get these things off the island, because we can bale and crush and process all this plastic and all this waste, but it's still there at the landfill. It's one of the things that we're looking at the moment, is talking to different partners of how we can get that off the island. These donated items is good, but we also need to consider those things. Just my comment, but thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you very much, Lola, for sharing this comment. And because yes, we discussed this with Mafileo when we were working on the documentary about about this issue of providing assistance. Finally was generated more waste to be managed in Tonga, and yes, it's an issue, and yes, it's I think we have to think about that before providing assistance, because yes, the objective is not to create a new or to generate more waste for countries to, and then they have to deal with. So yes, I agree with you. I don't know if there are other questions or comments or experience sharing.
Thank you everyone for the presentations. I was just looking at the challenges that that were presented in the great list of challenges there, and especially the last point on reaching the maximum capacity of the landfill. I was just wondering, the measures undertaken to, I guess, decrease the amount of waste in the bigger island countries, how applicable is that to smaller atoll countries such as Tuvalu, where the waste is actually falling into the sea? I mean, and if you have a disaster that's going to exacerbate your current waste level, I mean, how do you deal with how do you respond to that? I mean, Tonga has just mentioned ways of getting waste offshore, but at the same time burying waste to reduce carbon footprint. So it's just two different methods used. I'm saying a smaller country such as Tuvalu, do they bury the waste? They don't have a land mass. Or they export all their waste and increase their carbon footprint. I'm just trying to get my head around, what do we do with smaller island countries who face the same situation as us, but don't have the means to actually process that? I mean, it's not something to answer now. I mean, it's just something to look at, because I've been to the dump sites in Tuvalu, Niue, Marshall Islands, Palau, and I see in Kiribati, and you see that their land strip is very minimal. And I don't think they could afford to fill the capacity of this landfill and look for another landfill somewhere else to. So it's just, and the bigger countries, we're fortunate that we can do that.
But maybe it's also aligned with the comment from Imura-san at the beginning, is maybe segregation is,
Yes.
we have to increase the segregation of waste, like green waste and things like that. So there is a comment from Tonga. So, yes.
Thank you, Dalo. That's a valid comment you made, and it's something that I know the waste experts are still trying to perfect. But I think we're just lucky here in Tonga. We have land area, we have lots and plenty of soil. But in the case of Tuvalu and Kiribati, I think the issue, they should focus on waste minimization at first. And then, because they have very limited land area, I think composting should be a way forward for them. Getting a lot of soil coming in, composting on island. But I think in the case of hazardous materials such as asbestos, where we are very fortunate that we have a landfill site here that we can bury them here and then mark them for safe disposal. But for Kiribati and Tuvalu, I think the only option there is to you either contain them in a container, or you will have to consider the option of burial at sea. It's very safe, but it has to be done in a way that it's approved by the actual government in a safe way. So I think that's just my comment on dealing with waste management, disaster management in small atoll islands. Thank you.
Thank you. Leo, there is a comment from Anthony.
Here, Julie and colleagues, thank you very much. I just wanted to respond to Sioni's comment around about countries having to deal with the carbon footprint in terms of waste management. And, you know, in the discussion in Uruguay last week, one of the terms that we learned from the International Negotiating Committee session 1 was these terms about upstream, midstream, and downstream. And the issue of accountability, transparency, and liability for who is responsible for upstream, midstream, and downstream. So when they say upstream, they're talking about extraction and production. Midstream is around about circularity of the reuse and recycle. And then the downstream is to do with residual waste management. So the conversation got to the point that, there is responsibilities for developed countries because we are net importers, very few export, lots of import. So there's an imbalance in trade. Because of that imbalance in trade, that creates a lot of waste in our countries. That waste is not generated by the countries. They are generated elsewhere, but because there's no choice, that the responsibility should be put on the developed countries to bear the burden of the carbon footprint to remove the waste from islands as it should be. And so I just want to highlight that, the ownership or the responsibility for waste management, although we can do a lot about minimization, that there is really no choice in the amount or the type of products that we buy, and that the ownership or the responsibility should be pushed upstream to reduce the waste, hence to reduce the carbon footprint of those countries in which we purchase waste products from. So I just want to put that into the mix that, we should not feel so helpless. And so, there are some things that we can do at the national level, but most of it is beyond our control and beyond our choice. I just want to put it out there to the countries to consider in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony, for this comment. So I'm sorry, but we have a very big delay in our schedule. So Lola, your hand is still up. So do you have another comment or question before we have the break? And then we can finalize or end the workshop with the third part.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any further comments. I think what the point that Anthony raised about, it has to really come down to how we control what comes in as well to your country. So I think we need to look at the regulations as well and what's imported into the country to put some control on it, because otherwise we can continue, trying to do all this minimization work. But if the rubbish still comes into your country, and we have nothing in place to actually manage it and some regulations to control it, then I think there's no point. So yeah, it's all that we need to start looking at first before. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we will have a 15 minutes break. So I'm sorry it's a long break, but it is requested by our interpreters to have some rest when we have 3-hour workshop. So yeah, so we come back in 15 minutes, and we will try to finalize with short presentation, please, because yes, we are over timeline. Thank you. Everybody's back. We can start the third and last session of our workshop. So the objective of this last session is to discuss how we can reinforce the good practices over the region. And to start this presentation, I will ask Stalini if you can present the disaster waste management data collection project in Tonga, and also present the Kobo toolbox that you use to monitor the waste, the disaster waste after the tsunami and volcano eruption. Thank you very much. So left? Oh, can you hear? We can't hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, Authority Limited, we are the only entity that is mandated to manage and dispose of all waste throughout the Kingdom of Tonga. So consequently, sorry, I'm just testing.
So I think there is a technical issue with, we can't hear you. So because we can't hear.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm in the outer islands of Tonga, one of the islands, Ewa, and the connection here is not really good. So is everything good now?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, can you all? Okay, everything good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, first of all, welcome from Waste Authority Limited. We are the only entity that is mandated to manage and dispose of all waste throughout the Kingdom of Tonga. So consequently, all landfills are managed by us. This includes disaster waste. So what's that would be?
So sorry, I think sorry, but we can't hear you.
Have to ask how do we rapidly mobilize our teams to collect Kobo Toolbox comes in?
So sorry, I think I'm sorry, but the sound is very bad, and also the interpreter say that he can't do the interpretation because the sound is too bad. So may I ask, maybe Tai, you can assist us with this presentation? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, if the audio is not coming through, I think maybe the internet connection in the outer islands is an issue. Anyway, I'll work from here, Stalini, to support you because of the connection issue. Anyway, the Kobo tool application is for waste management purposes. This is based on a recent volcano tsunami data collection that was done by Lola and Stalini team in Tonga. And they used the Kobo toolbox. Next slide. So Kobo tool is more like a monkey survey, the Microsoft collection form and Google form, but it has advantage than those forms because they are you don't need to pay anything, and you can customize the forms, and they can perform different type of function that are appropriate to waste management. Next slide. With the one that was used by Stalini and Lola and team in Tonga, they been using it to collect data from the landfill, all different type of data, time, date, photo, GPS, including any kind of thing, the video, anything you can imagine as a data, you can collect using this form. Just a background with the two type of server that are available on the Kobo tool. For your information, the Kobo toolbox is created by the UN OCHA for disaster or humanitarian purposes. So you can do it either research or anyone with a submission of 10,000 per month with 5 gigabytes storage per month and unlimited projects. There's an open source software, so people, the experience learned from the use by people can use to improve the system. So how the Copper Toolbox application works? Yeah, it's how the Tonga did it, decide on data collection project, that which the landfill incoming waste to be recorded. They develop the form, then activate the form for use. They download to their smartphones and tablets, and then they fill and send it to the system. Yeah, so that's how it happened. They decide the form and can take any kind of data and went to the system. So this is the Tonga Disaster Waste Project. It was implemented from March until now, so it's still ongoing. During the tsunami and volcano in 15, so they generate a lot of waste, and this is the background of this project. Go on. So you can see a lot of waste generated with different throughout the countries. Keep on going. So you can see the type of waste generated during this disaster. Keep on going. Keep going. Yeah. Well, so in order to gather information from this disaster, we use the landfill-based approach. For whatever waste that comes to the landfill, that's what was targeted under this project. So J-Prism support the Tonga with the equipment and tools provided, support maintenance of the disposal site, as explained by our colleagues, and the system to establish to gather information. So I'll be speaking on this one. The pilot project to collect disaster waste using the Copper Toolbox with the objectives of establishing a system to be used during the future disaster, collecting data on what can be recovered for recycling, and also the system can be utilized for daily operation of the waste authority. Methodologies, they use the telephone with the downloaded app and online form to record the daily incoming vehicles details, the volume estimate, the type of waste, photos, and so forth. So this is the established system, just a scenario of the system. The Copper Tool server is based on the Waste Authority headquarters in Tongatapu, and information we collected from EUA, Apai, and Bavao, and then they all feed the information to the system. But this is the main server of the system. You can see Tonga Disaster Waste Database. You can see there the different type of projects they have, the data in September, and you can see the archive, the information in June, August, and the other months. So these are the useful of this type of system. The setting and sharing of the questionnaire and extracting data from the database. You can convert the data into Excel format, and you can do additional analysis if you are not satisfied with the automatic analysis that implemented by the program. This Excel format downloaded from the system, so you can use that. It contains all the data. The example of the automatic generated reports. There's analysis, and this is one of the functions of the system. It summarizes the analysis of the data on type of waste, what is being collected, keep on going. And you can see the curve when it started from January, and then it increased in May and April when the collection services were conducted by WOW and also Maytag. Keep on going. It can also show the incoming waste in composition, and mixed waste, green waste, bulky waste, building waste, electronics, expired goods, asbestos, dead animals, and so forth. Yeah, so those are, it also shows where the waste were collected from, and also the type of waste, the household, business, government agencies, and disaster relief supplies. So it captured, the system captured all different waste streams. It can also show you the incoming vehicles on a daily basis, how many vehicles that enter the landfill, and what type of waste. The frequency of that vehicle, you can also use it for time and motion study to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of those collection trucks. Keep on going. Yeah, the location of the collected waste. For example, this one shows most of the Tongatapu area, and those are the different locations in Tongatapu, different districts. Yeah, the proportion of the waste collected from contractors and the waste authority. So you can also show the result. Yeah, keep on going. Yeah, those are other informations. Just showing you what the system was able to capture. Keep on going. Incoming waste generation sources. Yeah, incoming vehicles by type. They all show different. You can also track a certain type of waste that come from different agencies by using the license plates. Yeah. Also, the disposal fee estimate by using the setup fee, you can understand how much revenue that was collected. And this is my input from the project team, the experience and lesson learned from using the system. Okay, I think this one, because of time and issue with Tongatapu or from Bavau, we cannot hear from Stellini. I think they have done a very good job, and we are planning to use Lola, Stellini, and the WAL colleagues to promote the same methodology to other similar disaster waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and I apologize to Salini for interrupting this presentation. So we will move forward now with the last presentation from Salini with the Pack Waste Plus Technical Waste Project Officer, specialized in solid waste management. So I think she's joining from the hub in Fiji. So over to you, Sally. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Simon Glay, the technical officer of solid waste with Pack Waste Plus. And my presentation today is I'll basically be presenting on the regional project that Pack Waste Plus is currently implementing on disaster waste management. Next slide, please. Yeah. All right. Yeah, this is a short video on the response assistance that we had done for Vanuatu. It's a short video. If Julie, if you're able to play the video from your end, please.
In April 2020, Category 5 Cyclone Harold hit Vanuatu, and particularly South Santo, among other islands. It devastated houses, buildings, communities, and their environment. The damages were enormous, and all sorts of debris could be found everywhere. Despite the hopeless vision left by this disastrous event, the locals did not give up and started to clean up. In response to a request from the Vanuatu government, the European Union funded the Pack Waste Plus program to help the country to recover.
In 2020, the Category 5 Cyclone Harold struck the northern part of the islands, but mainly was Sando Island, where we seated here and struck the communities, houses, most of the schools and people in the village, and left behind lots of waste and damage in the environment.
In Sando, like in Lucanville, it was badly hit. We got houses blown up. The vegetation was also badly damaged. Almost everything was totally damaged at the time, and we were very happy to have Backwest Plus to come over to do some general cleaning up, just to keep the general hygiene and sanitation very good so that the people can live around and enjoy the safe environment again. The general cleaning up was a form of reassuring the civilians that there is hope. The European Union funded the program through SPREP.
Well, firstly, I would like to thank the European Union and the fund that they donated to the two organizations. That was the province and the municipal council that they look after these areas. They did a really good job from big communities. They really did a big cleanup. And we would like to thank the EU for the funding that they have given us, given this team to work with the community to do the cleanup.
Thank you. Sorry, because of time, I'll quickly skip through my presentation. Next slide, please. So for those of you hearing about Backwest Plus for the first time, we are a European Union funded program implemented by SPREP, and we're working with 14 Pacific Island countries and Timor-Leste, focusing on our assistance to improve 8 targeted waste streams. And out of these 8, there is one of the waste streams we're focusing on is disaster waste. So our focus in terms of disaster waste is to complement other initiatives by projects within SPREP. And our main objective is to assist Pacific Island countries mainstream disaster waste management into the Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific, commonly known as FRDP. And to do that, we are implementing a regional project that provides practitioners guidelines. Sorry, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry, just leave it there. So our regional project is producing practitioners guidelines that assist NDMO within Pacific Island countries to create enabling environment that allows disaster waste management to be mainstreamed into national disaster management framework. So we had, next slide, we had in the past 2 months worked with the University of Newcastle to establish three main practitioners guidelines. First one is on the template and instructions on drafting of National Disaster Waste Management Guideline. These National Disaster Waste Management Guideline is localizing for countries the activities highlighted within the regional disaster waste guideline that was drafted through our PRISM project and launched early this year. The second one is back please. Disaster waste estimation methodology. So this is establishing a standard estimation methodology of determining volume of waste generated following a disaster, which of course is the outcome of this, the volume will then be inputted into the COBO toolbox, which I just presented on earlier. So this is this guideline is on providing guidance on how to estimate volume of waste. The third one is on the establishment of environment cluster or disaster waste task force within NDMO to guide or oversee the implementation of a National Disaster Waste Management Guideline. The guideline, of course, identifies activities to be undertaken before and after a disaster, and the task force will assist the National Disaster Management Office in implementing the proposed activities. We terming it as the environment cluster because there's opportunity to also include biodiversity assessment during the post-assessment process of disaster. Currently, following these draft, these practitioners guidelines, we are now working with a Backward Splice is looking to engage a company to establish videos that will provide easy guidance on what each guideline is intended for and how it is to be used by Pacific Island countries. I believe that would have been the end of my presentation, Julie. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for all this presentation. So I don't know if there are questions or comments. Maybe you can have 5 minutes to discuss the Kobo toolbox or the presentation from Saini, maybe. Is there questions? No question, just maybe for Thai. So do you think that this Kobo toolbox can help with improving like segregation, waste segregation, or?
Yeah, I think the Kobo toolbox is just that data collection mechanism that will fast track the availability of data, especially during a disaster. For example, if you have here in Bolu, and then you have the team in Hawaii, and this really applicable to Fiji and large islands like Solomon, you can develop the form and send the link to people in the outer islands to fill it and then send it back to you. The form, that's if the internet is available. So those are some of the issues. But the advantage of the system is to make those data available as soon as possible. And this app can analyze data quickly and then provide that preliminary report for decision making. If you look at the proper assessment by walking around and then analyze the report and then analyze the data and write the report, it may take another 2 weeks for you to do that before those information is available. But with the app, it will available as soon as possible, which give you an earlier indication of the status of disaster. But for segregation, unless you implement segregation, then you can't capture the information because once it's segregated, then we can estimate what is plastic, what is green waste, and then input in the data. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So, any additional questions, comments?
One comment, I can see maybe somebody from SPC in the room, because I know disaster waste doesn't have a real standard methodology at the moment. All other like housing estimation of damage, building, things like that, they all have some sort of assessment methodology at the moment. But disaster waste is something that still we are working. So hopefully our colleagues at will agree to have some recognize some system that can be used for just producing some data. I attended a training at SPC maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And then I communicated with some experts from the World Bank who were like specialists. And yeah, they also have issues. There's a methodology for sewage and sanitation. But solid waste and things like that, they still think that's a little bit hard to have a reliable system to estimate. So it's something that it still affect how to capture the disaster waste for costing of donor, especially donor, the PD and A's reports. They require that kind of good data from established methodology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, anything else before we close the workshop? Maybe we can close the workshop. So Anthony was supposed to deliver the closing remarks, but I think he had to leave. Yeah, so thank you very much all for your very interesting presentation. We learned a lot about experience from Pacific Islands. That's great that this regional disaster waste management plan or guideline is now available. We will share with you the links to this disaster waste management guideline and also some information from the framework for resilient development in the Pacific. We share the recording, and also if you want to join the community to discuss this issue, you can also join the discussion group on the Green Forum, and we will be pleased to share more information, documentation with the disaster waste management community in the Pacific and all around the world. So because it's late, maybe I will close. So thank you again for attending this workshop, and we hope that the content and discussion met your expectations. So of course we can continue to discuss this on the Green Forum. Gratitude to all our speakers for sharing their experience and knowledge during the workshop, and also to Island Innovation for all their technical support during this workshop. Thank you for all the IT teams and SPC and our partners in Tonga as well for organizing the in-country hubs and the catering. And also thank you to Sabine and Philippe, our dedicated interpreters who assisted SWAP with interpretation service during this year 2022. So this year is almost finished, so it's also the opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And yes, a blessed Christmas time with your families and relatives. And I look forward to discussing more with you next year. And just a last request, if you have time to fill the online survey, we will be pleased to have your feedback on the workshop, so it can help us to improve the next one. So you can do it now if you want, or we can share the link later with the other documentations. So thank you again, and see you next year. Bye.